All right, welcome everybody. We are very excited about this conversation this afternoon. This is a first for us at Convergent. We have had a lot of exciting things going on in the nonprofit space over the past 12 months, and I think a lot more excitement around the corner. And we've got some of our philanthropic team consultants with us today, just to talk through some of what we've seen over the past year and what we're expecting or maybe strategically planning for in the year ahead. This is going to be a really conversational opportunity. So those of you participating, we'd love for you to jump into the chat or the Q&A and share any questions that you might have as we're talking. We're certainly going to try to respond to those as we can. But before we go any further, just going to create a space for our team members all to introduce themselves. So if you may not know me, I'm Brian Abernathy. I'm the general manager here at Convergent, and I do a little bit of client-facing work still, but the colleagues I've got with me today are doing the lion's share of that. So we'll just work around here and let our Convergent team members quickly introduce themselves. Andy, why don't you go first for us?
Well, it's a pleasure to be with you, Brian, and Happy New Year to everybody on the call, and especially some of my colleagues I have not had a chance to see this calendar year. I am a funding strategist based in Greenville, South Carolina, and work with clients in a number of different sectors, from healthcare to higher education, independent schools, and so forth. So,
Thanks. Amy, why don't you go next for us?
Yeah, good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, wherever you're at. Amy Sexton Stanislavski. I'm a consultant with Convergent based out of the Chicago area.
Awesome. Alyssa?
Hi, Alyssa Schneider coming to you from Columbus, Ohio. And I've been working as a consultant with Convergent for 4 years now. Been consulting with nonprofits for going on 6 years. And before that, have a deep wealth of experience in nonprofits of all sorts of sizes.
Awesome. Perry?
Hey everybody, I'm Perry Radford in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I've only been working with a Convergent team since last year, but last year was coincidentally my 20-year anniversary as a fundraiser. So really excited to be here with everyone today.
Awesome. And Katie?
Good afternoon, everybody. Katie Davenport. I'm actually in Greenwood, South Carolina, not too far down the road from Andy Brubaker. And I am a funding strategist with Convergent Nonprofit, going into my third year with this team, and currently work primarily in the traditional nonprofit side, in higher education promise programs, especially, and with other organizations such as Humane Societies and YMCAs.
Awesome. Well, 2025 started with a lot of upheaval in the nonprofit space, particularly around grants, federal public sector support for nonprofits. It was for in many places still continues to be an area of great questioning of what will the final outcome be. There was fear of complete, maybe all out cancellation, restriction, complications. And then as we ended the year, we had some changes around the implications of tax dynamics related to giving. So just big broad brush there of federal dynamics and changes. What are some of the standouts in y'all's perspective from 2025 on the philanthropic market and nonprofits across the country?
well, I'll go first, and that is, the loss of federal dollars for a number of organizations continues to show why relationships matter.
Mhm.
The the ability to turn towards the group who are investing in your mission at a moment's notice, I mean, is vital, but it goes back to the relationships that you've had, that you've been cultivating and working. And so this idea, and we saw this, I mean, all of us heard the horror stories of organizations trying to come up with seven-figure, eight-figure losses. And they had no relationships to which to go back onto to even mitigate some of those losses. And so it just goes back to things that we say to our clients, things that we know. Relationships at the end of the day truly matter in this world.
Yeah, I think I'll add on because I was thinking similarly as an answer to this as Andy was. I think instability does create opportunity, and that's like a little bit of kind of a dumb catchphrase that might not mean anything, but I think as fundraisers, one of the things that's most important, right, is urgency for our donors, that they feel like there's a real reason why you need their dollars and why you need their dollars now, right, to make that case for their support. And I think everyone, all donors, understood the instability and felt like that instability was real this year for nonprofits, sort of across the board. And it gave you a place in which to come at that solicitation with the people, to Andy's point, the people the people you're already in relationship with, right? It gave you an opportunity to come at them and say, we really need your dollars now. Your, whatever, I'll just pick a number. Your $25,000 commitment last year meant a lot. We were able to do X, Y, and Z with those dollars. You're 25 or 35 or 45, hopefully, right? You're upgrading that, right? This year is making a huge difference. And here's why, right? We are in trouble. Like, we are not sure whether this, 7-figure, 8-figure commitment from the government is going to happen or not. And so like that urgency it's very compelling to a lot of donors. And I think this year, I mean, you'll see in the annual numbers for individuals has went up. I think grants also is a place where institutional funders that are not government are filling gaps where they can. They're changing their priorities based on some of that funding being pulled out of the universe on the federal side. And that does create some opportunities in some places where you may not be making up that 8-figure gift, but you are starting to increase revenue streams from those different areas of donors. And I think it's a place where individual donors felt maybe they didn't love the situation that each nonprofit was in, but loved the ability that they were able to like play an outsized role and kind of put their money where their values are and to make sure the things that they really care about continue. So I think in that way it was, I don't want to say a good year, but like there were some adjustments based on that like house of cards falling that became positive.
Yeah, no doubt.
One thing I'm thinking a lot about is nonprofit staff themselves. I think the most
Mhm.
recent numbers I've seen were at least 10,000 nonprofit staff laid off as a result of those federal funding cuts last year. And we're all in this industry. We already know people are regularly asked to do more with less. A lot of people have depressed salaries, and we're all here for a reason. We're all purpose-driven people. So it really affects our hearts and our souls when we go through these experiences as nonprofit workers, as people in this industry. So one thing I'm thinking a lot about is just how everyone in the industry is doing. It's a brutal year, and it's ever more brutal because of how we're asked to show up, how we define ourselves by the impact we make. And that can cause a moral injury for a lot of people. So that's one of the ideas I've been reflecting on a lot in the last year.
Yeah, I think there's a great point in there, Perry, of the headlines don't catch the depth of what these changes in grants and funding result in for people's lives. And it's not just the people relying on many of these organizations whose funding has been called into question or in some cases eliminated. And I think the important thing that maybe, again, like the silver lining that could be out there is the awareness of being ready with those other revenue streams, building those other avenues of funding before you've got to have them. We saw a little bit of this back in 2020 with the COVID pandemic of just what's going to happen if this thing we need is gone and not available at a much broader level. Uh, but many nonprofits lived that in a whole different depth over the past year. So it was one of the first times, candidly, where I was having conversations with clients and they were saying, "What do we do?" And I didn't have an answer. Like we want to be guides and have that expertise, but this was kind of uncharted territory for all of us. So hopefully that tumultuous period is behind us. But I think there's still a lot that's shaky ground for a lot of nonprofits out there. Katie, did you have something?
I do. I was thinking about the things that I've just seen primarily in the higher education with the two projects that I've been working with. I've seen a shift from donors being drawn more towards campaigns that are programmatic and not so much brick and mortar, especially because of the federal cuts that everybody is talking about. They see the need greater in making sure that a student can continue on, just specifically in that sector, they can continue on with school and can continue their process along to a better future for themselves, better lives. And I think, though, organically, which is a great thing, that through these more comprehensive programmatic campaigns that we've been seeing a lot of, the donors are becoming more engaged and have a little bit more ownership in the organizations and the campaigns that they're a part of, because they're really understanding the need and what they're supporting, not just a building that's being built.
Yeah, I hope this has driven funders a step or maybe two or three closer to, or maybe away from that. Well, we don't want to fund operations, right? Because at the end of the day, if we're not funding operations, nothing else is going to happen. And so there's again, maybe one of those potential silver linings is that light bulb going off for the critical role that just day-to-day infrastructure plays for organizations. One closing thought on this one. We had, as you might imagine, many conversations with nonprofits in this scenario the first half of the year of what do we do? And we found a pretty wide array of perspectives. And so for the nonprofit leaders on the call kind of thinking through this, what do we need to do? Moving from public sector funding to grow philanthropic funding, whether that's foundations, recurring annual major gifts, whatever it is not a switch that can be flipped. We had a nine-figure nonprofit reach out to us wanting to go out and raise, in their terms, significant philanthropic dollars, exclusively publicly funded. And our response was, you don't even know if your work is fundable to philanthropy because you've never stepped into those conversations before. The same month, parallel conversation with another organization that said, we'd like over the next 3 years to build 2.5% to 3% of our budget in philanthropy and contributions revenue, not public grants, to move towards stability. They were less than a tenth the size budget wise of that larger organization, but they were taking a methodical, strategic approach of, hey, we're not going to be able to flip the switch on how we operate, but today we see the instability that our reliance on this one funding stream has created. And that could be public grants, that could be a large foundation or benefactor that is just very, very generous to an organization. Those are good things, but those good things can become threats if they're not balanced and we become over reliant on them.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I had a thought on that, is that I think a lot of that rolls up to, as you're thinking about diversifying income streams, right? Like government and grants are very like, we will do this project and there will be these outcomes. And we will tell you that we did these and you want us to do those, right? That's like the premise on which you're building that like case for support, right? But with individuals, family foundations, right? You have to make a case that this is a place worthy of investment, right? And so we are a nonprofit who needs private dollars to run, and we are worthy of that kind of investment. And that's a lot of framing that a lot of nonprofits miss. One example, one like very tactical piece of that, for example, is when I start working with a nonprofit, I'll go to their Facebook page and look through the last 3 months of Facebook posts, right? And first of all, obviously, you want things like, are they communicating often to a group of people, right? Some basic stuff like that. Almost all nonprofits check, they've got that. Then the next litmus test for me of like, are you framing yourself as worthy of investment is, okay, now out of, they posted 32 times in the last 3 months. Great, fab. Out of those 32 times, how many in which of those did they frame that we are an organization that runs on dollars from human beings who are investing in this? And most nonprofits are not even, it's not even 3 out of 32. And I'm even thinking about that why. That doesn't need to be a message where you directly are saying over and over again, we are a nonprofit, we are worthy of investment, right? But are you talking about, hey, a donor gave this and this made this happen, or 462 people gave us money to be able to do this program, right? Those sorts of things that are constantly framing your organization that way. And even if you're not asking for money, like if you're not framing your organization that way to your constituency, whatever that looks like, whether it's Facebook or otherwise, right? Then when you go to make an appeal at Giving Tuesday, why are they including you in their list of charities, right? You've got to start framing yourself and your work that way instead of, often it just comes across as like, yeah, we've got this and it's being taken care of. And a big grant came in and Ford Foundation swooped in and made this happen, right? We tell those stories, but we don't tell the stories about how and why the organization is worthy of investment. So that's like, if you're not doing that, you've got to be doing that regardless before you start like some of those other pieces.
Yeah, that's a great, great point. It's communicating that impact is driven by the philanthropy, the generosity, the investment of those folks with resources. Alyssa noted earlier the Giving USA report, giving was up, right? So individuals specifically are being more generous than ever before to nonprofits. There's a lot of fun data that comes out in these areas every year. One of the big numbers that's ticked up this year, the great wealth transfer, all those dollars that the silent generation and boomers have that's going to hand down at some point over the next couple decades to Gen X and millennials. Estimates now over $100 trillion, and 14% of that roughly is what's expected to end up in the hands of nonprofits. What do nonprofit leaders need to be doing strategically, or maybe not doing or not neglecting as they think about this? I'll call it a shiny thing out there on the horizon with the great wealth transfer.
I think there's a couple approaches here that are really important. So when it comes to talking to your key supporters, I would say not just donors, people who have given lots of board service or volunteerism, or maybe specifically have planned giving intentions, start having the conversation about legacy and passing the baton in their family and how the family wants to continue supporting your org. Some will want to, some are going to find different interests, and that's fine. But what's important is having the confidence to have those conversations and ask, who else in the family should we be talking to about this? I would say the other thing is there are some pretty big generational shifts that we've been seeing over the last 20 years about solicitation preferences, giving preferences. And so having the skills and confidence around talking to other generations about their giving, understanding those differences around solicitation. There's so many great resources. Like one of the great resources I love is actually USPS puts out a great report every year on what they're seeing with direct mail. And believe it or not, young people still like direct mail and it still works. So I think it's important to think about things through those different perspectives and recognize and hold the complexity in those multi-generational family conversations, that what has worked with the elder in the family as it transitions to others in the family, it's going to change. It all goes to that kind of platinum rule thinking, how other people want to be treated, asking them about that, and asking for permission and getting insights onto how those relationships are going to be shifting.
Great, great thoughts there.
Yeah, I
Well,
second everything Perry had to say there. Uh, I would add also that you want to be careful about over making over assuming on capacity for someone, right? We have all the ways that we kind of make assumptions about what a donor is able to do financially for us. And, an example like, well, Sally Smith lives in this neighborhood, right? Sally Smith definitely can't do 50K over the next 3 years. And she may not be able to, but there's a generational wealth coming for Sally, right? And we may or may not know about that. And so thinking about the kinds of things that Perry's saying, I think become really important is what, so you're not making too many assumptions on capacity.
Yeah, that's a great point. Everybody loves to see wealth screening information. And I mean, it is a fraction of an inch deep into what really matters in cultivating a relationship to be able to move towards a gift of significance.
Yeah, and Sally's not going to show up on that wealth
Yeah.
screen as anything significant, maybe for years and years if there's a general wealth shift there. And by then, it's probably too late for your organization with Sally. Um, totally.
Yeah.
Brian, do I get to play the devil's advocate here
Yeah, we've got to
at
have
this?
somebody do it. It's important in this conversation.
It is, and I've personally in previous roles have seen how, you know, past donor loyalty does not automatically pass to heirs. I have witnessed it with clients
Totally.
in the last couple of years.
Mm.
But I want to step back even further in that, we talk about the transfer of wealth, the wealth accumulation, and you brought up wealth screening. A third of overall boomer wealth is tied in their primary residence value. And when you start, and they're living in these beautiful homes, but that equity at some point is going to be transferring to some level of continued care. And when we
Mm.
look across the country, assisted living facilities, nursing homes, these community continuing care communities, I mean, you can get into some of them as cheap as 150,000 to 500. I know of one that's in Georgia on the coast, that's already in the millions to participate in that. And so this we talk about this great transfer of wealth. Well, a lot of that equity is going to go to the healthcare ecosystem.
Yeah.
And then you've got the transfer of wealth into foundations, donor advised funds. People and that money's not going to be spent today. It's going to be spent over a long period. So building deep investment focused relationships with families will have benefits. And if you haven't started thinking about that years ago, you're already behind.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, I opened, relationships still matter. And so for me, that transfer of wealth with the number of people who are giving mega gifts to institutions, the other caveat is so many people forget about the lower level donors. The person who's been, the employee at the university that gave $20 a year, who is single, lives in the modest brick ranch, they pass away, and then the university fund catches a $3 million planned gift. And the majority of planned gifts are not these crazy, intricate financial, planning vehicles. They're simple wills.
Yeah.
And so having conversations about, as I think Alyssa said, legacy and giving, having just basic conversations of how you plan to leave a legacy. And now, today, not tomorrow in those conversations.
Amen, Andy. I agree with
Yeah.
all that.
Go ahead, Amy. I saw you come off mute there.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, to double down on Andy's point, the continuation of taking care of the people that are already on your donor list is starting to show through. One of the big metrics that came out of 2025 was the reduction of overall donors. You can actually check out these data points on the Fundraising Effectiveness Project survey. They provide quarterly reports on what donors are doing, what they're seeing, and one of the biggest takeaways is the amount of donors is reducing, but the amount of fundraising is actually upticked by almost 4%. So, keeping that in mind over the last quarter, what that means is you really need to heavily lean into cultivation, stewardship, and retainment of your donors. We're seeing donor retention fall in this last quarter as well over the last year, which we saw in Giving USA. So, think about the people who are on your list and show them as much love as possible before you start doing outreach for new donors, which also needs to happen in conjunction with taking care of who you have, but focus on retention strategies, which is going to be continued cultivation and stewardship.
Yeah.
I always love to tell people that you build the relationships before their capacity is ever built.
Yes.
That
Mm-hmm.
because you just never know. You
Yeah.
never know when they're going to be the big one. So
And
treat
there's
them all.
yeah, it's that constant um, not transactional perspective on your relationships. The I would say again, I'm going to be devil's advocate here. Not that you shouldn't have a plan for building an endowment and being capable of talking with your donors about planned gifts, as simple or as complex as they may want to be, right? Like that's absolutely a best practice. But you shouldn't just think about that, right? Just because there's a big number out there, we don't know how that's going to play out. Um, what I think is most interesting about that number, if you look at workforce trends, the baby boomers going into 2020 were the largest portion of the workforce. They're not anymore. Gen Z and millennials have both surpassed them in terms of workforce representation. So that means now baby boomers and the silent generation are still some of the largest funders to nonprofits across the country, but they're moving out of their working careers. That means their capacity to give towards annual sustaining funding is changing. The endowment, the plan gift, the complex asset gifts, yes, those are going to come up, but they're not going to keep the lights on next year. You do not want to be hoping for a funeral for that estate gift. And like I say that a little bit tongue in cheek, but it's a very real dynamic. You can't run an organization on a planned gift. You have to run it on your next wave of major gifts prospects. And that may be the next generation of the family. If they're inclined and have an affinity towards the work that you're doing, it may mean that you're going out there and thinking through advancement of your other existing funders, maybe at lower levels, because Gen X and millennials are in their prime earning years now, right? They're also, fun data points here, they're less likely, millennials and Gen Z behind them are less likely to have children, right? They're more likely to be higher educated. So they're theoretically, they're going to have more discretionary income. We've got this really powerful wave of future major gifts funders out there, but we've got to understand how to engage and connect with them while we're thinking about how to be a high value legacy gift opportunity for that wealth transfer.
Yeah,
It,
it makes me think of, oh, I beat Andy to the punch there.
ladies first, go for it.
Just with the boomers retiring, you have they are not as busy and you can have a larger portion of their time. Can they volunteer? Can they bring their grandkids on a Saturday morning to volunteer in your garden or like whatever the, X, Y, or Z, fill in the mission blank. But that does give you a different kind of potential for that relationship that you didn't have before with them. So just thinking about that and thinking about the dynamics of your own list.
Mhm.
Okay, Andy, go.
Yeah, go ahead, Andy.
Well, and I was going to say, when we're having this conversation about planned giving doesn't require all these bells and whistles. I mean, I've seen all kinds of things. I was with a client doing a development audit, and they were telling me about all this beautiful program stuff that they had paid for. And I said, well, When's the last time one of your fundraisers just asked the donor or the investor, you know, what they might consider for a planned gift?
Yeah.
That's free.
Hmm.
Yeah. What
Yeah.
do you
And
want your
easy
legacy to be like?
and
Yeah, it doesn't
simple.
have to. We make it so complex sometimes that we're trying to do all this fancy stuff. At the end of the day, it's a simple question that you can
Yep.
add into your regular rotation of things that you're talking. And if you're not visiting with your investors regularly, you got to step it up. And this is another conversation piece to sit back and listen. Once you open the question, keep your mouth shut and just listen to them talk, and then try in your mind to figure out how you can align that interest in their values with that of your organization.
I
Yeah.
mean, one really important tactic everyone should be doing is we know there's some generational preferences for giving by direct mail, for silent generation, and boomers. Every response device where you check off how much you're giving also should include a checkbox. I've included X organization in my will or bequest. So many great leads come that way. You can start that
Yep.
conversation in that kind of way. It doesn't just have to be one-on-one. We're at an event, we're having a chat,
Yeah.
we're having coffee. Start that conversation at any level that you are able to. It's incredibly important. And people are receptive. People want to talk about themselves, as I think we all know pretty well. So, and what better kind of question to ask than asking about people to reflect on their life, where it's led them, and what they want to leave behind. It's incredibly rich. People want to share that.
Totally. I would add to the simplicity piece of that is like basically what they need to tell their financial advisor to add X, Y, or Z in is your legal name, your legal address, and your EIN. That's all that a financial advisor needs to do whatever fancy mumbo jumbo they need to do, whether it's going to be a percentage of the bequest or this annuity or whatever. Those are the three things. That's all they need from you. They don't need any more direction from the organization than that. Simple, simple. Sorry, go Katie.
No, I was just going to tie back to Andy's point about sometimes you see organizations with lots of bells and whistles, and there's this whole process that you go through, and the fancy brochures that you have, and everything, and that takes away from that relationship piece that we've been talking about. It feels much more transactional that you're just wanting to talk about, what your plan for when you leave this wonderful earth, and it makes them feel like more like an obituary waiting to come, and it takes away from that relationship piece that we've been talking about, how important it is. When you start putting too much focus on that and making it such the shining star of the conversation, you start they will get the ick, and you don't want that for your organization. You want that to be a piece of the conversation that you have with them, and like y'all have all said, and then just continue to move on and build that relationship. You don't want to make them feel you're just kind of waiting on them
Yeah. Yeah.
to go. So, and I think too, one other thing, talking about the next generation, I've seen a lot, especially on one of the projects that I'm on now. Um, we have seen that shift to where someone will point us towards, you know, the the um, the head of the family, the patriarch or the matriarch of the family, and they are pointing us back to their children and saying, "No, we are passing that baton over." And I think some of the things that I've seen is that going along with this planned gift conversation that we're having, they like to see the impact that's being had now, and will want to be a part of the legacy later, but they want to see what that legacy is going to look like. What are they putting their legacy behind? And I think that's something that's really important to this younger generation that are now taking over the family finances.
Yeah. We got a great question from RJ. Amy, did you? I see that you flagged that you want to respond to this, so go for it.
Oh no, I figured the group would as well, but happy to respond. For all intents and purposes, I think having an opportunity to show a donor the recognition necessary for a legacy gift while they're still here is really important. And that's why I stress to organizations that are in plan giving is we don't want to celebrate them after they're gone. We want to celebrate them now. We want to talk about what that legacy looks like now. We want to involve their families, which just helps extend the reach for new donors as well as continued sustaining givers. If you have a donor that's elevated you to a family level, which, as we know, most wills and bequests leave dollars for family. That's the largest bulk of a bequest. If they've elevated you to a family level, that means that there's a true connection there, and there's a real chance that you can build a lifelong support and sustainable funding model with those types of donors. So, that's always my point is celebrate them now. Don't wait.
And I would add on that statistically, your number one prospect for a planned gift is somebody who already has a planned gift. So once people do it once they're like, oh, you guys can have this life insurance policy because I've got 3 other for the kids or whatever it is, right? Once they think of you and they talk about it once, and then their financial advisors kind of playing around and doing some different things, right? Your name's already on their lips, right? They're already thinking about you in that context. And so now, like, what about a percentage of the will? What about, right? Like the ability, and if you're building the relationship continuously, the way Amy's saying, you're really opening yourself up for that. So that's just like something to remember as well.
Completely. It's all relationship driven, right? To go back to Andy's first comments, especially in this area.
So one relationship I really want to hone in on is the relationship between the fundraisers and the financial advisors. Some financial advisors I found don't feel comfortable in parts of these legacy giving conversations. What they're best at is the technical details. But when it comes to the meaning, the purpose, the values behind it, that can feel a little bit nebulous to those advisors. So a great thing that fundraisers can do is position themselves as offering customer service to those financial advisors. So y'all have already talked about, providing that basic information. You can have a page on your website for financial advisors. You can even include basic bequest language as well. I've seen some issues at, large complex universities where sometimes language is put in the wills that is really disconnected from the current or future structure, purpose, usage at the organization, and no one wants to see that, right? That can be a really unfortunate experience. So positioning yourself to build the relationships with those wealth advisors, creating a specific resource for them, that's another way to kind of holistically support your donors. I think with this expansion that we're seeing in specific donor advising services, high net wealth people are more and more seeing fundraisers or donor advisors of an extension of their supportive professional group that they're working with. And we have to think about how we can show up in that way.
Yep, it's a great.
Yeah, stock is a great place. That's a place where if someone's giving a stock gift, you're already interfacing, probably 1 or 2 removed, with the financial advisor. You get that right? Like you make it really easy. You make sure that there's one sheet, a PDF, and that is all that financial advisor needs from you. He knows that you guys are a quick and easy place to be able to put stock dollars. So if he has a client who needs to quickly unload to a nonprofit and doesn't have an opinion, of somebody, right, yep, who can take that quickly and easily, gets the right acknowledgement back to his client. He likes the way it looks for his tax purposes, right? Or she, the financial advisor, can be a woman. I should be less gendered there. But that can be like a great example of the kind of relationship building that Perry's talking about that you're probably already doing with some folks anyway, that you can take advantage of.
Yeah. All right, we're going to shift topics here. Perry mentioned earlier the impacts of grant restrictions on nonprofit staff. We see this in a number of our clients right now. Staffing needs. We need more development staff. We need more accomplished or more familiar with this certain area. What is the staffing landscape for your general advancement, development director, chief development officer? Let's talk about what that looks like in the market right now from what we've seen over the last 12 months. Too open-ended of a start there, huh?
Well, I guess I was pausing to allow somebody else to be the first one. Um, I haven't seen case or NAIS case data points for this year in terms of the average tenure of a gift officer, but it just keeps getting more and more abysmal. We are seeing burnout. We're seeing people not necessarily job hopping because there's a better paying or it's all remote or it's hybrid. We're just seeing people just burned out because of expectations, whether they be perceived, real. There's a lot of things going in there, but I believe in our small shops, especially, that relationships, not just with our donors, but relationships leaders have, boards have, and understanding the work of fundraiser is causing consternation. We're just seeing significant turnover. And I'm dumbfounded by uh, local institution of higher education, flagship institution between Katie and I, that for a year and a half has yet to find a senior director of development. And the salary, every time I look at it, it just continues to inch up. And I'm just like, what does that say? And you know, we have this $24.5 trillion elephant in the room called AI as well. I mean, that was the
That's
value
the
of the
next
top.
question, Andy. That's the next question. You can't jump
I
to.
know, I know. The top 65 AI publicly traded stocks. That was their value at the end of the day when the bell closed yesterday. It was 24.5 trillion. But a small nonprofit that's trying to hire somebody at 50, 60,000 as an entry level gift officer, if they're lucky, they have those resources, let alone the budget to get them on the road to do the things that they need to do, is trying to figure out how to implement AI as well on top of it. And so, you're seeing a lot of staffing issues with very difficult and very hard choices being made. And unfortunately, there's a huge part of the population that really doesn't understand what we do. And so they think we are a salesman, a saleswoman, a salesperson, whatever you want to call it. And that really doesn't translate. And that the expectations of, oh my gosh, you got to close 1 million this year. You got to close 2 million this year. I mean, that's really grating on people. So I'm going to stop. I know all of my colleagues have a lot to say about this topic, but yeah.
I mean, I think you're on the money when it comes to fundraiser expectations. A lot of fundraising positions are not well paid, and yet the position itself, if you look at the job description, it's at least 2 to 3 different jobs worth of
Yeah.
work. That is a recipe for disaster, and people wonder why they can't keep fundraising staff. In addition to expecting fundraisers to do everything instead of having a very clear disciplined strategy that you're going to follow that's going to work for fundraising for your organization. Um, I think there's also, I mentioned this earlier, there's this siloing that's happened. To Andy's point, treating fundraisers like they're salespeople, like they wave a magic wand and they go out there and they get money without including the fundraisers, or without even including the fundraisers as a conduit to donors of establishing philanthropic partnerships. So when you're a fundraiser and you're working in the community, you're building those trusted relationships and you're trying to bring those folks to the table, and you don't even have a seat at the table organizationally, you're siloed. That really is diminishing And that's, I think, one of the unspoken reasons, in addition to some of the things we've already talked about, that fundraisers don't stay. It's such a thankless job. I think one thing we don't talk about is that there's actually like a fair amount of casual ridicule fundraisers face in the workplace where we're treated as less than, you just go out and get the money. It's diminishing. It's diminishing of our contributions. It's diminishing of our partners, our supporters. And I think it's really important that nonprofit leaders pay attention to how people in their organization talk about fundraising and what role and seat at the table the fundraisers have when it comes to leadership and managing the organization.
Yeah, very well said. Very well said. I'm gonna
And
go ahead,
I was
Andy.
going to say, and keeping staff isn't high dollar. It's simple things. It's supportive culture. It's fostering compassion across the entire nonprofit, the enterprise, whatever, and then providing clear pathways of growth as an individual. That could be attending a case conference. It could be attending the Association of for Healthcare Philanthropy. It could be, just going to a one-day training in the next county over. It doesn't have to be really expensive.
Yeah,
Um, so there's some really good ways to foster and retention.
yeah, no doubt.
I would say too, and this is coming, I'm wearing a little bit of my former executive director hat here, um, especially as a party of one for several years. It's really easy, and I've seen this in a lot of the projects that I work with, that the folks are they're in the right place because they love what they do. They love, whether it's a Humane Society or a YMCA or a Boys and Girls Club, whatever, they are in it because they love that work. And oftentimes what you see is when it comes time to need to raise money or to go through a campaign, they have been so mired down in the day to day. They get really in the weeds because they want to, and they don't have the support to show them that they need to be elevated. They need to have a seat at the table with CEO roundtables. They need to be a leader out in their community and to build those relationships so they can have a successful campaign. So I think it's really important for boards, especially to recognize that and to provide that support so that everybody kind of knows what they need to be doing, so that there's not ever oh my gosh, we got to do this now and get all this money, and then people start to scramble and they burn out quickly.
Yeah.
So I think understanding how important that dynamic is, especially in nonprofit world, is crucial to organization and their staff success.
Mhm.
Yeah, I would say building on that, Katie, is, how are boards or leadership of organizations measuring more than just the dollars in the door, right? The through line on this from the minute Andy kicked us off was relationships, right? How are we measuring how many visits are happening, how many interactions are happening with our high value prospects, right? And how are we making sure that, to Katie's point, a large percentage of our development team's time is focused there on moving those metrics of one-to-one asks, visits, right? Whatever makes sense within that dynamic for your organization, but how are we measuring those, not just the dollars in the door? I think is also important to keeping people, right? That's a number a development person can control. That's a number that they can bring the initiative fully, right? The dollars in the door, there's a lot of dynamics at play besides your development person, but that's really focusing on the craft of building those relationships with your fundraisers. And I think if you kind of can keep a focus on that craft as well as just dollars in the door, that can be helpful in keeping your team focused on what is really going to drive revenue, and then also keeping them encouraging. I think also, as we perhaps transition to the next question on AI, is when you're thinking about those things, making sure you're keeping your human capacity on human things like face-to-face interactions, showing up at the volunteer hour, blah, blah, right? Like AI is not going to replace the person who can come down to the pantry and talk to the volunteer who's also a donor, who's also, right? Like That's not going to happen. That's not going to replace that. So make sure that you have a focus on that when you're thinking about your fundraising capacity. And then there are other things like writing an appeal or blah, blah, blah that AI might be able to whip up for you, or at least like might be able to save you some time there. And then you don't have your development team focused on the ticky tacky things that, we might be able to get. And I would say also this, especially for people who are earlier in their fundraising career, it can be sometimes that ticky tacky stuff when someone's not calling you back is kind of where you want to revert back to, is right. You want to kind of keep wordsmithing that appeal and not focusing maybe on that piece. And that's a place where, that can be an easy snowball as well. So I think thinking about both of those things in context as you start to think about AI is important too.
Yeah, that's a great transition. So, what do we do with AI? Everyone is asking consistently now. We're submitting proposals and responses to RFP, and it's how are you leveraging AI? So what do we do with it? What does it bring to the table? What can it not replace? How should nonprofit leaders out there be thinking about the strategic application of AI in 2026?
I think a good place to start is to look at what resources you have, including number of staff, and really think about like the right scale of AI usage in your organization. Because if it's just you, it might help make some things easier, but is it necessarily going to relieve a lot more? Because you're going to have to be implementing it. If you're just a shop of one, is that implementation lift worth the result you're going to get out of it? As your organization scales and is larger and larger, I think there's going to be more specific use cases that subject matter experts or specialists can really implement to either, automate their workflows, make certain things more time saving. But I also think which AI tools matter. We're fundraisers. Most fundraisers don't go to school to become a fundraiser. The way we gain our knowledge is generally pretty piecemeal or patchwork, which has some trade-offs there. There's some advantages and disadvantages to that. So one thing I think about is using tools that are specifically made for fundraisers when you're working with an AI. And there's a number of tools out there versus using a generic ChatGPT, whatever's built into your Google suite. Think about utilizing those tools that are really made for the work at hand, and specifically, the tools that are really going to give you the biggest lift. One I've really enjoyed using is Google Notebook because it essentially creates a knowledge base. So as an expert organization in some very specific nuanced policy, you can create that knowledge base and then generate whatever you need based on that. Instead of just asking, hey, entirety of the internet, what about this information?
Yeah.
It's not specific enough. We need to get more specific in how we're using those tools to make it more authoritative, expert, and worth our time.
Great thoughts. Amy, I know you've got some thoughts on this as well.
Yeah, AI is only as good as the user. So keeping that in mind when you are starting to utilize some of these different tools, all of them have pros and cons, all of them do different things. Your more popular ones, your Chat GPTs or your Copilot, which is also Chat GPT, just with a new label, your Claudes, it really just depends on what the goal is, but it's only as good as the user. So if you're saying, build me a content calendar for a nonprofit, it's going to provide you with the most basic rudimentary language that's going to, be utilized by you, which is terrific. But if you're not adding in some of that personalized language about your sector or about what your goals are, it's just another tool in the toolbox. And it's just another time waster. I think for a lot of nonprofit organizations, you are much better received by going out and working your donor list personally. There are lots of tools that are already in existence that you do not need AI for. It's why the AFPs and the Convergence of the world exist. So use it in good health, I guess is the point, if there even is such a thing. But for me, I just find AI another way to lose time.
Yep. I'll offer one closing thought on this topic. It's actually two closing thoughts. Number one is you've got to be careful. What you put into AI is in AI. You should never put your donor list with identifying information and contact information into any AI. And don't ask me how I've learned of this, right? But people will just throw stuff out there, right? Um, so that's a huge thing. It's great for analysis. If you want to look for trends and you do not have an expensive, complex CRM, it can be really helpful. Pull off any identifiable information first. Use unique donor identifying numbers that are not going to be traceable, right? So just be responsible with your donor information, because a gaffe there can literally cost you the future of your organization. The second thing I would say, and I'm stealing this from a podcast that I've grown to enjoy called the AI Daily Brief, but they've got some great episodes on the impact of AI in different sectors. AI, while it learns, it has no intuition, right? It cannot replace the experience of a fundraiser, like Perry said, who has patchworked together this great mosaic of knowledge and understanding and interpersonal experience, and how to read a room, and how to understand that, hey, now's not the time for an ask, or now's the time to double the ask, right? So those things are innately human. And so there's some ways that AI can really help bring efficiency, I think, especially to the smallest organizations and to the largest organizations. But it's not a replacement for a people. It's a tool in the toolbox that's as good as the person using it. So that's my closing thought on AI. We've got 3 minutes left. There's six of us, so we each get 30 seconds in transition. One thing each of you would encourage nonprofit leaders to be mindful of as we move into the next 11 and a half months of 2026?
I can go first. 2026 needs to be the year of the stewardship. That needs to be the year of the thank you. Every year should be that, but 2026 especially really needs to be the year of the thank you. Find unique ways to thank your donors, personalized, unique ways to thank your donors. You will set yourself apart and do yourself a huge favor for 2027.
Great, great thought. I decided we're going to go alphabetical order. So, Andy, you're next.
Okay, so stewardship's a great one. I'm going to go, this is the year of treating your first time donor like your $1 million donor.
Mm,
Donor acquisition is expensive. Donor retention is not as. So your ROI is, you got to treat that first time donor like gold and mean it.
that's great. I think I'm next in alphabetical order. Um, I would say understand your acquisition points. In talking to a lot of clients around how to move prospects through to become their next major gifts, I will often ask, what is your strongest acquisition point historically for today's major gifts donors? And none of them know. So learn where you're finding, learn how you collected the highest value, most committed funders to your organization. That's probably where you're going to find the next ones. All right, I got to say the alphabet in my head here. Alyssa.
Um, I would say two things: calls and CRM. One of the really basic things that an organization of any size can do in any capacity is make a call to a donor a day.
Mm,
Every morning, 9 a.m., set yourself a 9 to 9:30, make one donor call. Leave a voicemail if you don't get that person. That's at least 182 working days or whatever. You are transforming your organization by doing just that. And then I would say two, CRM. If you're not learning things about your donors from your CRM, you're not using it. Most organizations are underutilizing their CRM and paying a lot of money and putting a lot of time into something they're not using. Also, if you're going to use AI, use the AI that's in your CRM. There's a lot of that inherently built in that's been there for years that we just haven't been calling AI.
Yeah, for sure. All right, Katie.
I would say 2026 would be a good time to like go back and reevaluate your mission and your vision that you have for your organization and create some clarity around that so that your communication can be really strong out into the community. There is no wondering what do they do, how could I be involved in it? It's there. And to avoid that mission creep, there are a lot of nonprofit organizations and communities that are awesome. And so I think just really looking at your revisiting that mission and vision that you have for your organization and creating the clarity so that your clarity is clear. It's clear out there in the community and people want to be involved in it. There aren't any questions.
Yeah, yeah, great thought. Perry, closing thought for us on this?
Yeah, I think in nonprofit, there's this ethos a lot of times of do more with less, but I actually want to encourage folks to do less. Kind of to Katie's point, focus on the mission. How is your mission delivery? Are you regularly communicating? Are you building relationships? There's a lot of bells and whistles out there, but until you're getting those basics right, don't focus on them. Focus on the basics, iterate from there. You're going to see so much better results because just doing everything is not strategy.
Yeah. All right, we got a great question. I know we're at our time limit, but John Rainoni, great friend of Convergent, dropped this in the chat for us. One fundraising practice that organizations should stop in 2026. So we could throw a couple out. Mine would be thinking more about the cost of the fundraising than what's being raised in the long-term value. Now that's there's exceptions to that, right? But I think we can tend to in the nonprofit space nitpick. Oh, if we invest in X, that's a lot of money today, but what could it deliver down the road? So quit worrying about today and think about the ROI. That's sort of a start and stop. Any other don't do it?
Yeah, stop underpaying nonprofit staff. If you can't afford to pay them a living wage, you shouldn't exist, or that role shouldn't exist. It's not okay to treat an entire sector like we are not worthy of living salaries. Just cut it out, please.
All right, last one, Andy. I saw you.
Yeah, because I was typing it to John in the chat and abandoning the belief that revenue has to be driven from gimmicks, galas, days of giving, back to the basics.
Yep. Yeah, it's a great thought. My answer was almost the golf tournament. So,
We're on it.
Yeah,
plans about
events
the
for
golf tournament.
fundraising sake only. Get rid of
Yeah.
them.
Yeah. Hey, this was really, really fun. I appreciate y'all's time this afternoon. This may be something that we repeat in the future, but I hope this was helpful for the participants, and thanks for giving us an extra 3 minutes of your day.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.